this is Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I'm here today with a fun dyeing experiment. I want to try to create a speckled yarn using Kool-Aid powder and a wool nylon blend. The yarn today is KnitPicks Stroll Glimmer yarn. It is as I said, a superwash wool nylon blend. 70% wool, 25% nylon, and 5% stellina, which gives it a little bit of a fun sparkle. Now, I pre-soaked this yarn overnight in a mixture of 16 cups of water and 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. It is not necessary to to soak the yarn overnight. About 30 minutes would be sufficient. And it's also not necessary to use vinegar in this case, but I was soaking yarn for another tutorial, so I had this in there as well. I am starting out with 4 colors of dried Kool-Aid. This is lemon, lime, I think lemon limeade or limeade. The label has been torn off when I saved it. Orange, cherry, and ice blue raspberry lemonade. Try to set them up here. So my plan is to occasionally dip a fork in water or something, dip in the powder, and then apply it to the yarn. In kind of random places. I could have just done, oh, you can't see where I am. I added a little too much water, so now I've got a bit of this red paste here. I could have tried just doing straight dry powder, but, which I learned from doing dry yarn on fiber, it takes a while to go on. So I've kind of got basically even a paste. Whoops, there's a chunk. Alright, I'm going to let that be. But yeah, I'm going to dip the fork in the water occasionally. You can see now as the dye is getting a bit more wet that this is spreading out a bit, but I am just really poking along, and I'm going to need to make sure to try to go underneath some of these sections to add color as well, because this is probably not going to penetrate the fiber very far. I like working with Kool-Aid because it smells really good. And I really, really like experimenting with new techniques. I might need to open up some other packets of color. And so where the skeins are tied off, I can't spread the fiber out as far. But it's okay if the colors end up mixing a bit. I just do not want to have a lot of volume of water here, because a large volume of water could result in getting like the colors mixing and spreading too far, which is why I initially removed as much of the water as possible. And so unlike before when I was using in my previous video, when I use an eyedropper to apply saturated colors, here I'm really getting smaller flecks of color. But I know I don't want to use up all of the red that I have quite yet, because I know that I will probably need to turn this over to apply color to the back. So now I am going to do some blue. Whoop, that's a lot on there. So I started with the red because red is one of the most potent colors of Kool-Aid. Blue is the blues are a lot less have a lot less dye per packet than the reds do. But this is kind of fun, just going randomly across, tapping color on. Doo-doo. That off, add a little more water, get some more dye on here. So, in theory, you could do this with anything that's somewhat absorbent and start with non-dry food coloring. I was just hoping to get darker patches of color this time. And if I mixed the Kool-Aid in water and then started applying it, each patch would be paler. The other thing that I learned the last time I was working on this, on making a speckled yarn, is that I had to move the yarn around a lot to get any kind of reasonable coverage. Because right here you're like, oh, it looks like I've got dots everywhere. But if you shift the yarn, all of a sudden you'll be like, oh, there's a lot of like bare patches in this section. So these colors may end up spreading a bit, but I am not super concerned. So let me show you what my palette looks like so far. And I didn't even rinse this off all the way before I went to start getting some grain. Sometimes get this down deep. Hopefully penetrate a little bit. I will flip this over before moving on. So I think I started to say that, I did say before that Kool-Aid has citric acid in the mix, so that is actually sufficient to dye the yarn. So in some of these places, the color repeat will be longer. I'm trying to remember to go across the grain of yarn so that way I get speckled the color in as short a distance across the fiber as possible. But given that I am making this up as I go along, I am pretty happy with how these specks are turning out. And then once we're done, we will use the microwave to set the color, because you need, when you're dyeing yarn, you need the color source, which in this case is the Kool-Aid. You need the acid source, which is both vinegar and citric acid today. And then you need to have a heat source, and we'll use the microwave to steam this yarn. But you can also use a steamer, crock pot. There's many different things that would work. This is kind of cool looking. And this time I am going to rinse it off, because now I'm going to add some orange. So the other thing that's kind of nice that I can share now is that if you use Kool-Aid but don't want to use a whole packet, it can last for months. I folded these in half and secured it with just like a chip clip, and then put that inside a Ziploc bag, and I'm using them right now. I really enjoy playing around with these different techniques with you. People ask me sometimes if I sell the yarns that I create, and I have no plans to do that in the near or in the distant future or anything, but some of these weird techniques I do are more labor intensive and take more time than like I think that someone who is selling the yarn might do. But hopefully from watching these videos, you can see how easy and fun this is, and so then you might decide to give it a try yourself. And And if you don't have access to Kool-Aid and want to use other food colorants to mix your colors, I would try this with a fork with, ooh, you could use like a Q-tip or a makeup dot or something that absorbs like a very little bit of the fiber before you apply it. You can see, oop, I think that's one of the biggest swatches I've had so far. Really trying to keep these patches as small as I can make them. Wow, this is looking pretty cool. All right, I'm gonna flip this. I'm a little nervous because if you look closer, actually there's not very many dry flecks. It's kind of absorbed, which is great. It's exactly what I want. But let's, yeah, see the back side is almost completely colorless. Oops. Once again, I'm spreading this out as much as I can. And then like we did with my other speckled yarn, we'll kind of keep moving it over and then adding specks until we are happy with the coverage that we get over the entire yarn. I'm not sure how long I have been doing this right now, but it's a little labor intensive, but I am still having a lot of fun, just like I hope you are. So anyway, I'm going to keep doing this and then I will come back and show you the yarn when I am happy with the total coverage. Here's my palette now. It actually really does look like paint. That is pretty cool. And the yarn is looking rather speckly. So now I am going to wrap it up. I guess I'm not sure if I said I'd covered my work surface in the plastic wrap. That is what I will use to help cook it. There we go, and I have a nice little jelly roll. And hopefully, you know, it's nice that this is still pretty dry, because if this were wetter, then some of the color could mush out, and then we could end up with a soggy patch of color versus these smaller specks. So I've put this little jelly roll onto a microwave safe plate, and I'm going to heat it 2 minutes at a time until it is warm to touch. After a total of 3 minutes in the microwave, the yarn is piping hot. I am going to let this cool down, and then I will heat it for another 2 minutes and then let it cool completely before I unwrap and wash the fiber. The jelly roll has cooled and I am ready to unwrap it. But look at that. You see no big pool where all the dye pooled or anything like that, which is awesome, because in the past when I have hand painted sometimes, the food coloring will just kind of pool out in at the bottom and you end up with a mixed color. So look at these specks of color. Now since I used some dry food coloring, I am expecting to get some color out, or I wouldn't be surprised if some color came out in this lukewarm water with dish soap. But after the first little bit, it seems as though it actually, a tinge of color might just be from the soap. That would be pretty exciting if there were no clumps of food coloring that lasted. So anyway, I am going to wash this fiber until the water runs clear, which, I mean, it's clear now, and there's no longer soap in the fiber, and then I will hang this to dry. Here is our finished yarn. Look at these teeny tiny specks of color that we got. We used a fork to apply dry Kool-Aid powder to yarn pre-soaked in a vinegar, an overnight vinegar bath. And we got vibrant, tiny specks of color. This turned out way better than I could have hoped. And not only did we use Kool-Aid powder, it was leftover Kool-Aid powder from another dyeing experiment. So this was less than 4 packets of color, and we got all of these incredibly vibrant specks. I cannot wait to explore this technique more in the future. Thank you so much for watching this dyeing experiment with me. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I hope you enjoy your next dyeing adventure.